guys, it's Nikki here, and I'm here to do kind of my mid-year stats. I'm pairing this video sort of with the mid-year book freakout video I'm putting out. I'll put a link up in the corner here and then a card at the end if you're interested in watching that. So what I'm kind of doing here is summarizing my progress for my reading year for the first half. I've been keeping track of what I've been reading and just trying to generate some statistics to kind of put it in perspective for myself and for you guys if you're interested in watching this video. So for some general statistics, I got these off of Goodreads, so if I reference my phone a lot in this video, that's why. Some of it too I've just been generating on my own on an Excel sheet because I've been keeping track. And in the front half of the year, I've read 110 books. It's not quite the end of the month, and by the time June 30th rolls around, I will likely have finished 2 more books. I'm currently in the middle of Bloody Rose by Nicholas Eames, and This Is How You Win the Time War. The names of the authors are escaping me. I'll put pictures of both on the side here. And within this, I've read about 39,000 pages, because last year was my first year with the channel, and by the end of the year I'd read this many books. So I'm really impressed with the progress I'm making, and I can largely attribute this to the fact that my job allows me to listen to audiobooks. And within the books and pages I've read, I'll put up the graph here that I made. And in January, you can tell I was super pumped. I read about 30 books. And then every month after that has been somewhere between 10 and 20. May being my lowest amount of reads, but that is also the month where I read the most long books. Like I read Children of Time, Children of Ruin, The Blade itself, Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. There's just a lot in there that were over 500 pages, so not as many books, but just as many pages. And then that'll also lead me to, like I mentioned with the audiobooks, I've broken down my books into what kind of format I have. I'll put the graph here again. Audiobooks, with the exception of about 5 of these 48, almost 50 audiobooks, with the exception of about 5, they're all from the library. Just with COVID, I've had to do a lot more of my library borrowing either through ebook or audiobook, and it's come out the most as audiobook. I also have a section, physical format, which is broken down into copies I own, copies I've borrowed from friends and family, and copies I've borrowed from the library. And those work out to about almost half, with my ebooks 12, all of which are from the library, bringing up the rear in terms of formatting. I'm not crazy about ebooks. I do have a Kobo Mini that I use, and I take that on with me on trips, but again, I haven't done a lot of traveling, so I've been reading a lot of physical books and audiobooks at work. In terms of publication years, I got that graph off of Goodreads. I'll put it up here. I've read like a reasonable span. I think the earliest book I have goes back to sometime in the early 1800s. But I have a lot more books clustered around the 2018, 19, 2020 release dates. And that in part has to do with my Goodreads challenge, which I'll talk about later in the video. The Goodreads challenge itself, I got the idea from Books with Emily Fox. I'll link her channel in the corner if you're interested in checking her out. I highly recommend her. She's a lot of good sci-fi recommendations and a lot of just fun, salty, petty reviews that I always find very, very enjoyable. Also off of Goodreads, I got my longest and shortest book. Longest book was Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. Yes, Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix with like around 1,000 pages, I think, 900 pages, something like that. And my shortest book is Pearl, which was a graphic novel about a girl trying to get out of the Yakuza. The average length of the books I've been reading have been about 350 pages. I'm hoping to up that a little bit. I do have some longer books planned for the back half of the year, but we'll see how that pans out. And my average rating is about 3.8 on Goodreads. On my tracking, my average rating has been about 3.8. So even though it doesn't track my half stars the same that it does on my personal Excel sheet that I'm making, or I'll throw that chart up here as well. As you can see, I've read a lot of books that fall into the 4 to 4.5 range. I typically don't pick up books if I don't think I'm going to enjoy them, and I know that's really reflected in my stats. Although I have read equal numbers amazing books, 5-star, and 2 to 2.5-star books. I've just picked up a couple duds this year that I've picked up because other people have raved about them and I just didn't enjoy them, or I'm outside of the intended audience. Which happens. It's a hazard of reading, and a hazard of reading on BookTube. So with that, I'm going to just quickly talk about my top 3 books and worst 3 books this year. The 3 that I've enjoyed the most were Kings of the Wild, which is high fantasy. It's just a fun adventure. They treat the bands of mercenaries like 80s rock bands, and it reads a little bit like a Dungeons and Dragons campaign with a bunch of friends who are just like, you can see when they get like their crit fails and crits. And it was a lot of fun to read. I highly recommend it. The other one is The Martian by Andy Weir. Sci-fi, but really funny. I really enjoyed the way Andy Weir wrote the main character. If you don't like that kind of journal or log entry style writing, you probably won't enjoy this, but that's just a personal formatting issue for many people. And then the final one is Children of Time by Adrian Tchaikovsky. This is the best sci-fi book I've read this year, hands down. It was amazing. I've been recommending it to everybody I know that reads sci-fi. And I took this as a recommendation from Books with Emily Fox. It's a book she's read that she's raved about, and I totally agree. Lives up to the hype that I've heard. Highly recommend for you guys. And now we go to the worst 3 books. And some of these were expected. The Elite and that kind of The Crown series by Kira Cass. I wasn't crazy about. The first book was okay, but then 2, 3, and I think I got to 4 were just kind of sucky, and I didn't care for them. In fact, I can't even remember if I bothered picking the 4th one up. The next one was All the Ever Afters. I had really high hopes for that one. It is a retelling of Cinderella, but to my dismay, they took a lot of the whimsy out of the fairy tale, which really impacted my enjoyment of it. It wasn't a terrible book, but it was one of the most disappointing, worst books I've picked up just for myself this year. And then my final negative is one I read recently, Dr. Zhivago. I haven't read a lot of Russian classics, and after reading this, I don't know how many I'm going to pick up now. I just didn't care for it. If you want to hear me rant and review it, link up in the corner and down below. All right, so I'm just going to quickly touch on my most disappointing and most surprising books of the year. I'll start with my most surprising. For me, it was The Blade Itself by Joe Abercrombie. I was pretty pumped to pick this up and enjoy it. I typically don't enjoy a lot of grimdark. Like I read Poppy Wars and didn't care for it. And what was the name of the other one? I read another one and it wasn't great. So I was really impressed that I enjoyed this one so much when I picked it up. I felt pretty invested in the world and in the characters, or at least where the characters were going. Then I'll go to my most disappointing. I can't remember if I said this one for the mid-year book freakout video, but for me, one of my most disappointing books was The Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. I had a handful that were kind of all tied, so if this isn't the same one as in my mid-year book freakout video, just how it is. I wanted to mention this one. It's not even so much that I didn't enjoy it. I did enjoy it. I think I gave this book about a 3 out of 5, and the reason I found it so disappointing is so many people were raving about it, and a whole bunch of people said that it was amazing, and it just didn't hit for me. It does have some grimdark, a little bit of magical realism, like low fantasy, and that's just my general opinion. I know a lot of people really liked this book, and I don't begrudge you that love or like for this book. And with that, I'm just going to jump into the challenges section, and this is kind of the last section I have to talk about. And for me, I did the Goodreads reading challenge as adopted, and I adopted as what Books with Emily Fox is doing, where you read books that were shortlisted or the #1 for the Goodreads Book Awards in each genre. I did this to help force myself to read some new genres. I wanted to expand the amount of genres I read in, and I felt like this would be a really good place to do it. I'll throw a chart up here. I can't remember the exact numbers, but I know sci-fi, fantasy, as usual, have been my highest read genres. They're just the books I enjoy picking up the most. However, I did surprisingly read a lot of nonfiction and a lot of poetry. Given that I read, I think, 1 poetry volume last year and maybe 10-ish nonfiction, I've been really impressed with how much I've been picking up this year. With the poetry collections, I've actually been reading a lot by Amanda Lovelace. I found them really interesting. I find they read a little bit more like prose or maybe even slam poetry than they do traditional poetry, but the messages that are in them are really important, and they're just really well done. I like the aesthetic that is used to emphasize kind of what's being said. I really recommend them for people who are interested. And nonfiction, I've been reading a lot of them as audiobooks at work. My job just really allows me to be able to absorb a book this way. And I've been really enjoying the nonfiction stuff, especially when you get a really good narrator. It just makes the topic that much more interesting than just reading in my head. I will admit, I have been cramming as many audiobooks into this last month that are nonfiction, just because I want to feel good about how much I'm getting done on my Goodreads challenge. I'll include a link for my Goodreads in the comments, or I'll include a link for my Goodreads below. I do have a shelf that's just like Goodreads Reading Challenge 2020. That's really all I have to say. Once I started getting the stats kind of together, I decided to make the video out of it because, who knows, maybe somebody wanted to watch it. And if you made it this far, thanks. And if not, that's just how it goes. And that's all I have to say. I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.